Here we are for the Evolution Performance Driving School course analysis for the 2013 SOLA Nationals. This is the West course by Elliot Speidell. You'll notice on this course the western side is a little bit smaller in area, so the courses tend to be a little bit narrower, and in particular that is the case here. So a little bit of favoritism towards narrow cars, not as much line choice as there is on the east course. So the focus for drivers is going to be on car placement relative to the key cones and speed management throughout those sections, trying to get through as quickly as possible and be ever so precise. Right at the beginning of the start, as you're getting ready to get the start signal, you're going to want to glance over to the right and look for the first three offset cones and get that in your mind prior to launching the car. As soon as you get ready to launch, get your eyes down to the first corner pointer cone, and as you come around there, look ahead now to that first three-cone offset section. You're going to want to get your shift done relatively early for some cars into second gear. Oftentimes there's a focus on trying to carry the gear too long, and what's going to be really more important here is getting through that section without losing too much speed. As you approach the three-cone offsets, you want to get your eyes on all three of them, and in particular position yourself so that you can backside the middle cone without losing too much speed. It is a little easier on exit. There's a little more distance there than there is on entry, so you will not feel as pinched as you might otherwise. All right, as we exit that three-cone offset section, we're heading up to the first 90-degree left-hand turn. We're going to get our sight line to both the corner apex cone as well as the last cone in the far wall down there to the left. Make sure you get your eyes fully ahead there so that you can see how big that turn is. As you approach that, you're going to head towards that last cone on the right of the wall as you move your eyes over to the left for the first two cones of the slalom. So head to the right, but look left and watch for those cones to line up. And here's the picture of what you're looking for. This is your turn-in point. As those cones line up, you don't want to get too close to that first cone of the slalom until you're able to get to the backside of that cone. And here's your reward for doing so properly. That's a very important part of the course. You get a very long straightaway section here if you get backside on that first cone. So take advantage of that. If you try to get too greedy on that first cone, you're going to be fighting to get back to this situation. You're not going to be able to take advantage of the power section. Note also, down to cones 203, 204, that's a slot turn at the end of the straightaway. So you've got the straightaway down here, but you're going to have to maneuver down to the right and come around the backside of cone 203 at the end of the straightaway. Here's the view as you enter it. That's again 203 and 204 that are highlighted there. This is the end of the straightaway. You're watching those two to line up as we did earlier. Get on the brakes a little bit, breathe, whatever it takes for your car to get through those cones. As you come out through the slot turn, now you're presented with another three-cone slalom that then leads into a left-hand sweeper. You'll note that third cone of the slalom is actually a sweeper entry cone, not an actual slalom cone. So that turn is quite different from the first two cones of the slalom. As always with a slalom, backsiding each cone, highly important. As mentioned earlier, that last cone of the slalom is actually an entry cone for the sweeper. You want to get your eyes between that and the first pointer of the sweeper. As you get turned in, get your eyes fully across the 180 section. Look down towards the next pointer cone and the outside of the double gate that leads on to the following slalom. This is a very large 180. It does lead downhill. You're going to modulate your speed, be right at the limit, but get your eyes way ahead and let the car float out all the way to the outside of that double gate. As we approach the slalom, you'll note that outside of the double gate is in fact lined up with the slalom. So we want to get out there. We don't want to drive straight to the first cone of the slalom. We want to be able to get on the backside of that first cone of the slalom. So we're going to head towards the targeted double cone of the gate and watch for the first two cones of the slalom to line up, and that will be our turn-in point. And this is what you're rewarded with. Just as those cones start to line up is where you start to turn in the wheel. And there they are, fully open. We call that the door opening. And at this point, you're going to drive right on the backside of that first cone and proceed through it. As we exit the slalom, we're approaching yet another transitional section, this one with a right-hand turn that starts it. Again, we're going to head in one direction and look in the other. We're going to head here to the left where you see the targeted cone, but we're going to look to the right for the next 2 pointers, the entry to the transition, to start to line up so we know exactly where to turn in. As we're heading left and looking right, we see the first 2 cones of the transition start to line up. That is our turn-in point. And note that as that happens, we also pick up the 3rd cone in the far distance, which is where we're going to head to next. As with all these transitions, you want to see at least 2 at a time for offsets. And as we pass the first one, we now pick up the 4th cone. So now we have cones 2, 3, and 4 in view. As we go by cone 2, we now pick up cone 5. So we have 3, 4, and 5 in view. Again, getting on the back side of each of these, highly important. Modulate speed so you get the car rotated around each one. Towards the end of the transition sections, the very last cone that's got a pointer on it is in fact not a transition cone so much as it's a sweeper entry cone for the 180-degree sweeper that's about to finish it. So as you run out of offset cones, make sure you pick up that cone. As you pass the sweeper entry cone, glance over to your right. You'll see a nice row of 4 stand-ups with a whole bunch of pointers. Very easy to pick up visually. Glance over there and that will get in your brain the exact radius and how large that sweeper is, and it's quite large. While the sweeper is large, it's also downhill off camber, so be careful. Your car is going to want to push out there a little bit, so modulate speed. We want a tight line here around through the middle gate of that sweeper so that we can minimize distance, but modulate your speed as you go through that off camber section so that you can minimize distance but also be right at the limit. As we're halfway through the sweeper section, we're starting to eye up the transition that comes after it. Once again, we've got the same sort of situation where we're going to be targeting to the left. We're going to be heading to the left, the circled cone there, as we eye up the first 2 transitional cones with the pointers. So head left and watch the cones on the right start to line up. As you approach the transition, you'll see the doors start to open up. The cones will line up. That'll be your turn-in point. Here we are. We've already started to turn in, and now our eyes are proceeding forward to the next section, which is the last cone on the left of the outside wall, as well as the triple pointer. As we go by the triple pointer, we're moving our eyes even farther forward now to the second outside wall. We're going to let the car drift all the way out there and start to roll into the throttle as we unwind the wheel here. This is a little mini straightaway. You want to take advantage of it. Staying to the right there, we're going to eye up the next section, which is again another 3-cone transition. We're going to aim to the right to the single outside cone as we eye up the 2 triple pointers. All right, so here we are. We were looking to the left while we were headed to the right, waiting for the door to open up. Here it is. The door is starting to open up. The cones are all lining up. This is your turn-in point. You're going to get on the back side of each of these guys, particularly the first one. That is absolutely critical, but you want to keep all 3 of the next transition in view as you approach it. As we come through the transition, we're moving into the final left-hand 90-degree turn. We're going to get our eyes ahead to the second set of pointers as well as keeping the first one in view. Quite a large radius turn here, but again, downhill off camber. You're going to want a tight line to minimize distance, but you're also going to want to be right at the limit of adhesion so you can maximize your speed as you do so. Coming through that section, we're about to enter the final offsets into the finish line. Get your eyes all the way up to the outside wall there. That is the first offset cone. Last cone on the left of that wall is where you want to get your eyes focused as you maintain that tight line through that section. This last section is a classic set of offsets, but it's disguised with a whole ton of cones. Visually, very difficult to see, but there's really only 4 cones here that matter. The first one is 544, the end of the wall to the left there. The second cone is 603, the end of the pointer wall to the right, and it's actually a wall, but you're focused on the last cone in the wall. Beyond that is cone 611, left-hand side of a long row of stand-ups, and then the fourth and final one is the finish line. That is cone 612 down there. So if you look at it this way, those are the only 4 cones out of all those cones that really matter. And as you approach any offset section, you always want to keep at least 2 of them in view. The tendency for most drivers is to focus on the next one only, but that doesn't give you a good idea of the curvature. You want to always look at 2. So as you pass one, pick up the next one. Getting near the end of the offset section, we're down to the very last one here. We've got cones 611 and 612 in view. Eye up the finish line, that's where the pointer is right there. There's a tendency here to want to go a little too fast here. The red mist sees the finish line and comes over, and there's a tendency to want to keep your right foot in it. For cars with a lot of power here, you're going to want to resist that, because the guy that gets to the finish line the quickest isn't necessarily the guy that has the highest trap speed going through there. So you want to modulate throttle so that you can minimize distance between the last offset cone and the finish line as you're continuing to try to add power through the finish line. Note also that the finish line area, the finish chute, is actually somewhat short, so you don't want to be out of control coming through here, because it's quite easy to ruin your entire day by taking out a cone in the finish line. So once again, that's the West course, Elliot's Speidell's 2013 offering here. This has been the Evolution course analysis. I'm Andy Hollis. Good luck to all the competitors, and we'll see you out there.